Good morning. We will call the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for Wednesday, August 18, 2021 to order. Let the record show we are absent one commissioner, Mr. Bullinger. First item on the order of business would be the order of business. Mr. Hadley, is there any additions or changes to the order of business?
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chairman. I have one addition. It would be adding number 7 under the work session. It would be a DA discussion on process.
Okay.
That's all I have. Thank you.
All right. Commissioners, any questions? All right, I would look for a motion to approve the order of business. We have a motion by Commissioner Bush, second by Commissioner Dukart. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, we will move on to our number 2 item on the agenda here is the minutes of the previous session, which was June 16th, 2021. Seems like a while back since we met. Commissioners, any additions or changes to those previous minutes? All right, hearing none, I'd look for a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Commissioner Dukart with the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right. Item number 3, we have no action items today, Mr. Hadley, looks like. So we would move on to item 4, which are public issues of concern not on the agenda. So if there's anyone in the public that has anything they'd like to discuss or any concerns they would like to present in front of us, this is your time. You can step to the mic, or you can call into 701-456-7006.
The conference is currently empty. You will hear silence or music on hold when connected.
Anyone in the public has any concerns for the Planning and Zoning Commission, you can step to the podium and state your concerns. Seeing or hearing none, we will close that section of our agenda and move on to the next item. Any items not on the agenda that the commissioners would like to discuss or bring up? This would be your time.
I just have one question on those horse condos. I keep getting questions about how many horses will be allowed on the 1 acre lot?
Probably one. It's a rationale of health district standards that allow only a humane upkeep of it. So, I mean, you can't really keep, Loretta's a horse person, so she could probably talk on how many horses could actually be sustained on an acre, and I'm going to say I doubt even one can be sustained on a 1 acre lot by itself. So, Loretta, you want to jump in on that? And I know she knows her horses much better than I do.
I would be surprised for them to keep more than one on an acre. Are you thinking that each home in that area would have a horse on that property?
Mr. Chairman, I don't think their intention is to have any horses on the
That's what I thought too.
on
only.
the
That
actual
was my
houses.
feeling.
Stables only.
That's why the stables are there.
Right.
I don't think the intention, and maybe that's something you need to
Clarify.
clarify. I don't think the intention is to allow any horses on the house property.
That was my feeling also, so that's what I was kind of
That was
getting
my
at. I was
interpretation as
I
confused.
don't
well.
think we
but
prohibit it, but I think they can take them there. Zoning wise, they can actually take
Well,
them there.
I
So-
could probably take a horse to my house downtown Dickinson. I'm not going to do it, but, I'm talking about keeping it there.
Yeah.
So I think the public's confused on that then, because if you buy one of those and build a home, do you have to have a horse?
No,
Okay.
no. absolutely not. And you don't have to have a stable.
All right. Thank
No, I
you.
think,
I
I
do
think
know
the
that.
stables are there to offer that ability for somebody that is a horse lover to have access to their horse in an easier manner than, but I don't think the landowner, and talking with some of the people that are involved with this, I don't think the intention was to ever have an actual horse at their house and penned at their house. I think that's why they're building the stables. But
That
probably
was-
need some clarification on that.
That
Yeah,
was
that-
my understanding. There wouldn't be horses kept
On the actual
full-time
lot.
on their residential lot. The horses would be kept at the condo, I guess, the stable.
Okay, I think
But
we
you
need
wouldn't
to
have to.
do more clarification on that, because people are thinking they're going to buy this 1 acre lot and have the horse on their property, and I'm going like, I don't think so, but whatever.
No, that was not ever the discussion when we were in planning with putting the plat together.
Walter, you saying according to zoning, though, they could actually do that?
They could actually have it though, yes, because it's on rural residential.
I think we should mention that to the developer and let him know, because that could be a huge detriment to selling those lots if one, I mean, I think the horses, my intent as was stated, is I think was for the horses to be in the stables. Anybody else think differently when we went through that?
That's how.
I actually thought they were allowed a horse,
You did?
So did I.
Yeah.
I mean, the public's asking, I'm going like,
because
well.
I think they could
Okay.
ride their horse from their property to the stable. Well, I gather that's why they're built around that. But I thought I saw it somewhere, but
I guess I didn't see it as that just due to its location in town and the neighbors and stuff like that. I assumed the stables were where the horses would be kept, separate from the residential lots. We probably should get some clarification on that.
If they have covenants, I'm not familiar with their covenants. I'd have to look at that and see if they
Okay.
prohibit it.
Okay,
Because
maybe
if
in
they
there.
privately do it, then that's
Gotcha.
a different story. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else with anything? Okay, we'll move on to item 6, which is extensive today. Work session items, starting out with our first one, the comprehensive plan update. Mr. Josephson's going to handle that, it looks like.
Yes, although both the planning director Hadley and I believe the city administrator are going to have some comments on this. What you have before you is a evaluation of the policies in the land use element, and what staff wishes to do is to, we don't need the slides for this one, Walter, that comes later. Is every meeting staff will try to bring to you the policies in a certain chapter of the comprehensive plan and give an update as to whether those policies have been met either fully or partially, and some recommendations for plan updates. So commissioners, I don't know if you've had an opportunity to review, the memo and the attached document. I know there's a lot there, but I just wanted to highlight some of the policies that were in the land use element that the city has accomplished. Rezoning applications are reviewed to be consistent with the future land use map. The city has, I'm just jumping around here, the city has established an urban service area, and that can only be amended by ordinance. Also, that any new rural residential zoning district shall be outside the urban service area. And then there are a number of policies that are tied to certain types of development, incompatible types of development not being adjacent to each other, or certain types of development being allowed along planned collectors or arterial roadways. Also, there is a policy about encouraging planned unit developments, and I believe since the plan has been adopted, I think there have been 8 planned unit developments that have been approved by the city. Also, the requirement of pre-development meetings, prior to the submittal of applications to the, for review by the Planning and Zoning Commission. Also, there were changes to the sign ordinance, based on policies in the comprehensive plan. Also, under the mining overlay district was established. Site plans are reviewed to ensure high-quality development. The city staff has a weekly site plan review meeting where that takes place. A downtown mixed-use overlay district was approved. There was a downtown visioning process that was done. There was a downtown master plan and parking study. Also promoting downtown residential development, and that was part of what was achieved through the overlay district. The Renaissance zone has been expanded. There were some industrial properties that were removed from it, and it was expanded to include more commercial properties. And we're going to talk about the Renaissance zone later, once we talk about the new census figures. And that the city and park board coordinate in planning and developing downtown civic and recreational amenities. And then there are a number of ones that were partially implemented. For example, looking at, there was a preliminary study that was done about quiet zone crossing, quiet railroad crossing areas. And while the city did not implement a downtown mixed-use overlay future land use map category, adoption of the downtown overlay district helps to meet the intent of that policy. And speaking with Planning Director Hadley, there were a number of issues that staff looked at that when the comprehensive plan update takes place for the land use element, should be considered, such as amending it so the agricultural future land use map category would be primarily in areas within the extraterritorial zone. Also that evaluating the amount of land on the future land use map that's actually in the mixed use future land use map category. So many things have changed since the time that the comprehensive plan was adopted, and there's a fair amount of areas that are designated as mixed use, which requires practically requires planned unit developments for most rezonings, and perhaps there are several of those that shouldn't be in that future land use map category, anymore. There was an interchange land use category that was adopted as part of the West Dickinson plan. It applies to the exchange on 116th, and perhaps putting that on other highway exits. Also revising the policies in terms of amending the future land use map and annexation to promote infill. And then also looking at the city's population now exceeds 25,000, and going ahead and consider expanding the extraterritorial zone from 2 miles to 4 miles. There'll be more discussion about that later on. So those are some of the things that should be considered in any upcoming updates to the comprehensive plan. I'm here to answer any questions, and so is Planning Director Hadley, about either the summary sheet or having read through the attachment A. I think one thing I will note is that there were a fair amount of these policies. I know people say, well, a lot of times you do a comprehensive plan and it sits on a shelf and gets dusty, but in this case, I think the city has actually done a fairly good job of implementing many of the policies that were in the land use chapter.
Stephen, thank you. I think some of the stuff that we've done over the years has been a subtle changes in implementation of like the meetings for development or whatnot, and that did kind of change how we did business here slowly, so that was a good objective. We do want your input. We want to make sure that we don't drag this out forever, but we also want to make sure that we get your input and get the direction, so when we as we move forward and adopt a new plan, which the goal is to do an update by spring of next year, spring or summer of next year, that it truly reflects where we are in 2022 and the goals and objectives of where we want to move forward for the next 5 years. And I say 5 years, we can have the plan be a longer plan, but every 5 years we should revisit it. And we've kind of tried to do that and work on that, but it not a full help. And the grant we received did help, so we're going to have some help from KLJ to do some of the technical stuff and some of the help that way, and it'll help guide us moving forward. So please tell us what you like, don't like, visions, things you hear in the community. This is the time to start putting it on paper.
Okay. Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Joseph and Mr. Hadley on this?
Not just on the ETZ, I want, but not right now.
Okay. All right, we will move then on to item 2 on our work session, adult entertainment.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I will be heading this discussion this morning. Just so that the Commission is aware, the city did receive a request for this type of facility recently. In reviewing that request, it came to the city's attention that we had some inconsistencies within 2 of our code sections. If you had a chance to look at the packet that's in the packet that you have in front of you, you'll see that this type of establishment touches the Chapter 39 part of the code as well as Chapter 3. So we will be coming forward, making modifications to both of those chapters to make sure that they're consistent with one another. So you'll see the changes before you. I think we'll be bringing back those to be addressed as an action item next month. So I would stand for any questions if anybody has any at this time.
Questions, anyone? Hearing none, I guess move on to item 3 on our work session, wireless telecommunication facilities in public right-of-way, and I think that's Mr. Josephson also today.
Yes,
This morning.
just a moment, please. Thank you. Commissioners, what you have before you is a draft of it'd be amendment to the future land use, to the zoning ordinance regarding the wireless telecommunication facilities in the public right-of-way. And this was a topic I know that the city staff has been discussing this for a number of months, and it's tied to the telecommunications companies wanting to put these devices. It increases the 5G service in areas. There's nothing in place now if someone wants to put this on either a structure or a pole or a light pole or whatever that's in the city's right of way. So what you have before you is a proposed addition to the zoning ordinance that would address this. We looked at ordinances from a number of cities. This is modeled primarily after the city of Bismarck's ordinance. What's contained in the proposed amendment, it would cover the requirements. It would cover it would cover permit issuance fees, which I believe the fees are actually are regulated by the Federal Communications Commission. In fact, a number of these processes are the procurement of technical and other specialized consulting services if needed to review this, the amount of review time, temporary or conditional approvals, and proximity to other facilities. And as I said, I believe many of these things are actually regulated by the Federal Communications Commission. It also contains general conditions for design standards and minimizing impact on adjacent property owners, the installation of wireless communication facilities upon existing structures, the attachment of them to city-owned structures, and also the cases where there's a replacement or addition of city-owned structures. And that's been known to happen where the communication company will replace them or put their own in within the right-of-way. Also, the attachment to city-owned buildings and general indemnification. as I said before, the cities, this is modeled after Bismarck's ordinance. Also, the cities of Fargo, Minot, and Williston have adopted similar ordinances. So this is for, this seems to have shut, okay. We had discussed this previously, had given a presentation about this a couple months ago at Planning and Zoning Commission, so this is a draft, and just waiting for your direction as to whether or not to go forward, make any changes or questions you may have, and whether to go forward with this, arrange for a public hearing to go forward with this amendment to the zoning ordinance. And I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
All right, commissioners, do you have any questions for Mr. Josephson on the telecommunications draft ordinance that they're putting together here?
Mr. Chairman, the only thing that we added to it that was specific to Dickinson dealt with our decorative light standards and how they fit in there. So.
And I believe there was also something in there about, I think it had to do with facilities that were built on the ground and amenities, especially if they were within the downtown area or within a certain number of feet of a historic structure.
Yep. And then I do, Ms. Winko, I think it also affects franchise agreements. If MDU or one of those companies wants to have co-locate it in, I think it will affect them as well. I don't know if you want to address that.
Mr. Hadley, yes, it could. I believe in reviewing the ordinance that I put together, I believe it is addressed in there. Could we see, that being a possibility? Absolutely. I know we are getting consistent requests from the North Dakota Department of Transportation to sign off on some of these agreements, and so having an ordinance in place will allow us to move forward with some of those requests.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right. Anything else on this, commissioners? Okay, we will move on to Comprehensive Plan, Chapter 12, Capital Improvements, Tables Review.
Before you do that, Chairman Friedrich, so is this a direction from the Planning and Zoning Commission to go ahead and prepare this for
You guys
public
think-
hearing?
They should move forward. I think that's the consensus.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Then Item 4. Mr. Josephson, looks like you're up again.
Yes, I'm having some technical problems here. Can you hear me now? Otherwise, I can project my voice. This is another update of the comprehensive plan. When the comprehensive plan was adopted, there was a capital improvements program that was adopted as part of that, and the improvements that were identified as part of that table were ones that were identified by the consultants and staff during the planning process. And the projects that were in there were meant to either address existing deficiencies, future needs based upon population growth. And just to remind you, at the time that the comprehensive plan was adopted in 2013, they were projecting a population, I believe, about 39,000 people in the year 2020, and we just got the 2020 census, and it's 25,700 approximately, so we didn't get near that, but this was based upon, as I said, the examination of the city facilities and what was needed for, number one, for existing deficiencies, and number two, projected growth. So I'm just going to go through this slideshow. What's in this slideshow is similar to what you have in your memo. Getting a battery change.
Mr. Chairman, as we're fixing Stephen's voice, the city should commend itself on the $360 million of infrastructure that we have done that has enabled us to spur and promote and accommodate growth up to the 35,000. Really, we're not far from being able to do that. So the city has obviously taken part of that comprehensive plan to heart, and we've done our portion in accepting new growth. Now we need to focus on what we have currently. So.
Thank you, Ms.
Okay, let's go.
Hadley, Mr. Josephson?
Okay.
We have technical difficulties.
I think I'm hoping there we go, my technical difficulties are solved. When the comprehensive plan was adopted, there was an implementation vision statement that's the implementation vision statement that was associated with it. And then there was an implementation goal that said to establish a 5-year capital improvement plan to program community investments and infrastructure and transportation improvements to accommodate future growth. When the capital improvements in chapter 12 is the one that covered capital improvements, and the intention was to aid in the capital improvement planning process by providing a prioritized list of recommended community investments based on assumed future growth. Well, and also any deficiencies included in this list of projects that would correct existing infrastructure deficiencies, as well as projects that will be needed to accommodate expected or forecasted growth. And those projects were divided into 3 planning periods. First one was 2013 to 14, 2015 and 2016, and then 2017 to 2035. Okay. At the time of plan adoption, there were 104 capital improvement projects that were identified through different areas: water, wastewater, transportation, solid waste. There were a number of them that were identified, but the first 3 were the ones that most projects were identified in, which were water, wastewater, and transportation. The number of projects that have been completed since that time have been 40. We'll get into that. The remaining projects that have not been completed, they've either been partially completed, or they're in progress, or they're growth-driven, which meant that they would be needed if the comprehensive plan, if the city actually hit those population figures that were projected in the comprehensive plan, or the projects were no longer needed or no longer viable. So at the time, this is just the general status of projects. There is a table attached to this, and also one that you were given, that City Engineer Marshak had gone through and had noted which ones were completed and then which ones were either in progress or were no longer needed or were driven by growth. I'm just going to focus on the number that were actually completed. At the time the comprehensive plan was adopted, there were 28 water system projects that were identified. We know that there were the 2 water towers, and then there were the water distribution systems. Of those, 7 of those projects have been completed, and I believe those 7 dealt primarily with existing deficiencies. There were 20 wastewater projects that were identified. 8 of them have been completed. The transportation projects identified, there were 48, 19 were completed. Solid waste projects identified, there were 2, one of them was completed. Stormwater projects, 4 identified and 4 completed. There were police projects identified, and I believe that was a shooting range, was 1. The public works projects identified was 1, and that was completed, and I believe that was the new public works building. And as I'd stated, those were ones that were the ones that were completed were ones that that primarily existing deficiencies. When you look at that table that you have in front of you and that you have, and this is also in my memo, any of the projects that were highlighted in yellow are completed projects. Projects with the initial IP means those are projects in progress. The growth ones with the notation growth-driven have not been undertaken because the city did not reach the level of growth projected in the comprehensive plan. And there was another there was another notation, which was EBL, which means that's an abbreviation for East Business Loop. So this is just a status of how many projects there were in the capital improvements program and how many were completed. And you probably can't see that, but you all have a copy of that chart that City Engineer Marshak had completed, much to my relief. I was going to do my own table, and this just made things, simpler, for this update. So we are here to answer any questions you may have.
Commissioners, any questions or comments regarding Mr. Joseph's presentation?
Huh?
Yes, we finally made it over 25,000.
Yay for us.
There's a lot of information in here. I don't know if there's anything that I can pick out, or you guys can pick out that you have any questions on, but if so. Winningham?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman
Good morning.
and Commission. I just wanted to make a couple of comments so that it's not disconnected for what the city staff has been planning. When I first arrived here, there was a few things that I wanted to review. One of them was the comprehensive plan for the city that's really subtitled the 2035 or the roadmap, the Dickinson roadmap. And one of the things I wanted to use was where are we at on the map is what I'd like to say. And the staff, I directed this so it's not a surprise. They reviewed pretty thoroughly all the documents or all the additions to the comprehensive plan. There was an additional review done in 2016 that may have come before one of the planning bodies, but I just wanted to connect it. So really fundamentally the section in our code that talks about master plan under the North Dakota statute, that's what this comprehensive plan was adopted to be. And so there's some statutes that require the city to have this master plan on file. And then also in our code, it requires the city administrator to do a number of things for master planning and a number of things for comprehensive plan. And that designee is our subdivision administrator, which is Planning Director Hadley. That's who's the primary agent would be for taking these matters to this board here and asking for a review so that when we make additions, we comply with state law in our code. And so those additions would come before you, and then you would make some determination whether or not you want to proceed with these changes for our master plan or comprehensive plan. And then we would go before our city commission and have them adopt that back into our, by resolution or in our code, or so, in some manner. And city attorney would probably help me with the procedure itself, but in general, that's what we would do. Take that information from this board, take it to the city commission, and then we would have a public hearing. There are in some of these, when we change the master plan or the comprehensive plan, we have to do a public hearing. So are there any questions with, I said a lot there, but I just wanted to make sure it's connected to why we're even bringing this up in the comprehensive plan review. So on the map right now, we were projected to be 39,000 and some change at about this year. We didn't hit that, and that's okay because we're postured. We've developed all of these infrastructure needs based on that population, so we should be in a pretty good situation. I think the last time, and Mayor Decker's here, he's talked to me about this multiple times, that we spent somewhere in the neighborhood of almost $400 million to get where we're at. And if you looked at this comprehensive plan, we would have needed to spend, there's a number at the bottom, but it's close to $700 million by 2035. So we hit the mark pretty well to provide infrastructure so that we can receive growth. We can get industry to come in. We can do the things that the city needs to do to increase revenue for businesses, for economic development. And so this leads into what we're seeing as part of the addition of 25,000, or at least the certification by the census that gives us 25,679 people in the city, which then allows the city of Dickinson to increase its extraterritorial jurisdiction to an additional 2 miles. And then I think that's on the agenda today.
Yeah,
So if there's any questions for me, I just wanted to make a few of those comments so that there's a connection point of why the staff is working diligently on this matter.
thank you, Mr. Winningham. Any questions for him?
I think the one thing that should be noted on the census, and Mr. Winningham can probably back me up on that, we are 25,000 and some change, but there is additional information there that outlying border very close to the city of Dickinson is another 3,000 to 4,000 people, basically. So we're very close to that 30,000 mark. So when we're going forward, we have to include those individuals because they are a direct impact. And when we're talking development also, we need to understand that those people are that close to the city, even though they didn't get into that final count.
So it is an interesting topic. The state lays it out of what a city should do with this extraterritorial jurisdiction, and that we essentially not necessarily must extend the zone, but if we so choose, then we may do that, and there's a process for that. What Mayor Decker spoke to is during the census, it was a little bit, I'm not sure of how they do all the data, but they included what was called the Dickinson City, and they included an additional North Dickinson in some type of census, and it wasn't delineated where that is, and that was an additional 577 people. And then they had something called South Dickinson, so there's 3 parts to the census, and that was 3,420 people. So in total, we would be looking at anywhere from 29,000 people roughly that we would have oversight over as far as the city. And so it's a good opportunity now to look at what that additional 2-mile exclusion would look like, or territory would look like.
Just a question, that going over 25,000 or over 35,000, other than looking good, does that give us any eligibility for government grants? Does it increase any opportunities for us?
Well, I wouldn't speak to all of the opportunities that are out there, but there are a number that are 50,000 as a cap. So 50,000, there's math, and that's part of how they do housing. A lot of this goes with HUD and how housing is identified as a city that has more than 50,000. Even in the federal laws that we're currently seeing, we became what's a non-entitled entity, which is we're not 50,000, so it took much longer to get us some of those dollars from the federal government. But 25,000 is important when you look at some types of grants and some types of ways we can fight for certain federal funding, and for retail. So some of the retail organizations that we're trying to bring here to the city have a under 35,000 population rural program. So we want them to look at our city and say, okay, we're close. We're within the margin with 29,000, and you can make the case that Stark County came out with their numbers from the census, and that was about 39,000 and some change. And so you can make the case, we just have to be able to do that. We will benefit from having this census data. We benefit from receiving more taxation revenue from our roads and the way the state does the math. The city has been shorted for the last multiple years. I didn't go back too far, but 2010 was 17,000, and somewhere within 2010 till now, the state had their own version of what we were, and that was at about 23,400, and we stayed there until it was released on the 12th of August. So they were shorting us 2,152 people, and that math is going to matter because we'll have a better distribution. So I can't answer all of it, but I'd say it is going to help us.
And the reality is, we all know during the boom, the height of the boom, we were probably pushing easily $30,000 people with all the individuals doubled up, tripled up, quadded up in housing. They were not accountable. Watford City dealt with the same issue. I mean, their census data, even though they grew like 400%, Watford City, we all know that they were much larger. And it just hit, that COVID hit at the same time the census was going on, and oil downturn, and everybody left, and I think looking at the information, looking at the comprehensive plan, there are some things that we need to address, and then there's many things that we did very well, but there are things that we need to address and make sure that we're stay on the schedule.
I have a question regarding retail. Have they looked at us again now that our numbers are up past 25,000? I know that used to be where they wanted, you had to have at least 25,000 or they were interested in coming, so.
So I would say that we're off to the races now. So 12 August, there was some things going on prior to that with those that are, as we sit in most of the same meetings together, in Chamber of Commerce and with our Stark Development Corporation, they are looking now, they were already postured to try to entice retail, they've been talking about it, or other companies that are willing to come here economically, and this will only make our case better, having that census number. Even though, as the mayor talked about, in the comprehensive plan or our master planning, we do include transitional or transient residents. And that was, if you looked on there's a scale in the comprehensive plan, and it shows on that scale that we would be at about a 6,000 population for transient that are really unaccounted for, only by the city services. So we're going to keep a close eye on that as well when we see some of the companies that are hiring and bringing in transitional workers, those that aren't permanent residents but are still living here. It's difficult to count those. There's a number of different metrics, but it's difficult to count just how many are here for work and not considered full-time residents.
Thank you.
Anything else? All right, thank you, Mr. Winningham. Okay, if there's no other questions, there's a lot of good information in here. A lot of stuff that we accomplished, which is good to see, so. Our next item on the work session is an update from Mr. Hadley on the AT&T cell tower.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Update from June when we were talking about this item. It's the 41 Villard. They are totally in compliance with their SUP. They didn't quite meet their deadline date, but they were close. They have done a good job down there, and the building is for sale. I've let people know about that that have come into my office looking to do some stuff downtown. So don't know if it'll happen or not, but it is in a much better place as far as accommodating folks if people are interested in it. So, and they are in compliance. I don't know if have they finalized their building stuff for their antennas, Mr. Dukart? Do you know? Don't know. That's fine. I'm sure they're in the process.
It looks much, much better than it did.
They've cleaned up all the debris and all the other stuff, filled all the weeds. Did their parking lot actually, which wasn't really something I had to do, but
Yeah, I saw that.
I have a feeling that's a sales item.
All right. My mic is hit or miss here too, so. We'll move on to the next item then, which would be item 6, the ETZ boundary planning discussion. Mr. Hadley.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I think Ms. Winko and Mr. Winningham obviously already weighed in. He might weigh in again. This is just kind of obviously we found out Monday that this was an opportunity. I've got a little map here. You've got it on your screen, but I thought you might enjoy having one that just kind of shows in your hand the area that we're talking about, some of the areas we might not want to include, we may not. The areas in yellow on that map are areas that we actually could have right now, that we have not included in our ETZ for whatever reason. Very little areas, but usually those areas are areas where there's not a lot of development demand right now, and there wasn't a lot going on, and maybe it wasn't a good fit at the time. Really, I guess from the standpoint of Mr. Winningham kind of introduced it, we really just need to have the conversation on whether or not you feel that we should move forward, questions on it, anything that you might want to do. I think our GIS person, he's used to getting requests from us on a short notice, and he popped this map out pretty quickly, so he did a great job on that. So I can't take credit for the pretty map, so. That's about all I have. I mean, I feel that, we probably should start looking at incorporating some of these areas. We've got some projects in the queue that we've already been trying to secure funding on that I think that it would benefit if it was actually expanded to include in our ETZ. So just comments on it.
Mr. Hadley, yes, I have a couple questions. When we extend that ETZ, how does that affect the people in that area? Either detrimentally or for the good? I mean, what does it do for them?
It makes them adhere to our zoning standards. So they would be rezoned to whatever our zoning designation would be for that particular area. There's a process. We did it a few years ago to kind of clean up some of the areas that we'd established before. Stephen went through and identified those. We had the zoning that they had on the board right then, and then change the zoning legitimately, and there's a process to do that, and they would be involved in that process.
I'm guessing you anticipate there would be some people who would be against this or not, that we'd have some complaints?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. There might be a few people that would be against it. All in all, it doesn't change it. With our building department now, it doesn't really change anything from the building standpoint, so it would be a seamless fit that way. I guess we'll hear if there's going to be some.
It also creates more responsibility for our city employees and stuff like that, more work, more.
Well, it creates more for the planning department. The building department's already out there, so.
Okay.
So it creates more work for, I guess.
I mean, the difference would be, now if they get pulled into our jurisdiction, it'd be our ordinances compared to the counties, so there might be some differences there, so. As far as the planning or even building, county has some different building codes also. I don't know what's going on with these mics today, but they work about half the time.
And I think it does incorporate the areas, I think I'm going away too. It incorporates the areas the mayor was talking about, and Mr. Winningham, and the 30,000 people that we're servicing, roughly. It basically includes all of those people then, as well.
So would that bring in those, like you were talking about, Mr. Mayor, the 3,000 plus people on the outside of the 25,000?
I think our ETZ presently probably encompasses those individuals already, most of them.
Okay.
If you look, a 2-mile radius is pretty big. The 4-mile would just allow for us to be a little bit more involved in some of the developments, larger developments with our zoning, our planning and zoning, so.
That additional 2 miles basically more than doubles our area, doesn't it?
Yes, it does, sir.
And most of these people are on like Southwest Water already, right? So,
Yes.
so if they came
Yeah.
in,
If they were on, if they have access to
Yeah.
water, yes.
It doesn't change utilities or anything like that. It's just, it basically, as Mr. Hadley explained, any additional work of follow planning and zoning, And we already have an MOU with the county for our buildings and codes to do all inspections, so no real change for them. Right now, buildings and codes, when they go out into the county, they adhere to the county rules. So anything that would change if we go into the additional 2 miles would then fall under city code. So,
Has the county objected, or would they object?
that would be for Mr. Franchuk.
The first I've heard about, I guess, is that nothing's been discussed on it, so I couldn't answer them. But I'm sure there's gonna be some public hearings. I would think people would come forward to that, right?
Oh, yeah, I would think we would need to have some public hearings and some discussions to start.
If you do look at it, it does take the zone all the way to the airport. So if there is any business development as the airport progresses in size, and that is something that would fall into our jurisdiction then. And at one point, when we were supposed to get the full complement at the airport, the runway and a new terminal, there was discussion out there, and that was, again, during the height of the boom. There was discussion out there that individuals were looking at commercial development around the airport, as generally they always do. But since, the downturn and everything, that's kind of trailed off. Somebody's got a metal plate somewhere blocking all this this morning, Mr. Winningham. But it would take some discussion. It is something, though, that I think we really do need to address, and we're going to continue to grow.
Okay.
I'm just going to add to the comment. So it's not I said it before, it's not a must-do, but the city has a statutory not a requirement, but we're authorized to extend the ETJ or the jurisdiction, and the county can negotiate some things, but they can't stop it. So the county, it's not like, well, we need to discuss it with the county. The city gets to determine whether they want to extend it, primarily because we bear the burden for all those city services. So we will, if we think that that's the measure to go forward with, it would just need to make sense. One of the things we look at is Patterson Lake. Since we bear a lot of the burden for Patterson Lake in terms of economic development for our city and recreational use, it is also our secondary water supply.
I think our system needs to be updated.
It's on its we have, thankfully, we have updated our system. It's just in the different building. Right. It's being so. I'll just say that Patterson Lake is one aspect or one line for our economic development that we want to continue to improve, is our secondary water use in the event of an emergency. We're still maintaining that line. One of the things you saw that was really important that we just talked about with Stable Estates is one of the issues there was making sure that conduit didn't get damaged we still maintain the proper easement, so that whatever development occurs, we still have that conduit line from Patterson Lake to go to the plant in the event we need emergency water for the city. So I think it's really important that we maintain that. This change would cover all of Patterson, which then gives the city potentially the authority to seek those Corps of Engineer permits that would allow us to dredge, clean the water better, lower the floor, the toxic algae, and then have a place where people would like to, have more recreation. But primarily, it's for the clean water, and I think that's where we would seek additional funds, as we always should for projects of that size.
And last week just reinforces the need for us to make sure that is a viable secondary water source with the water break that happened with Southwest Water last week. It didn't shut it off completely, water to the city, but we do need to have a backup. And seeking federal funding through the Clean Water Act, clean up Patterson, dredge it,
think it's this mic.
Yeah.
I think it's this, I'll stop talking. It is this mic. Okay, we found it. Sorry, Des. This one right here, I'm going to take. I'll speak loudly. If you want the statute, we still have work to do, staff work to do, but it's chapter 40, chapter 47, for the statute that provides some of the data.
I know that Patterson Lake, they are now purchasing their lots too.
Yes.
So that's a big plus. Took
Yes.
us 20 years to get there.
And Park and Rec is now the owners of all the land around Patterson. So for us to expand out to the very edge of Patterson out there and to work with Park and Rec to develop that area is very important, I think, to the, not only to the having that secondary water source, but also turning that into a much needed and improved recreational area. So, and I know Park and Rec has plans, and Commissioner Frederick and Commissioner Karski, they've been working on the trail system, and so there's other things that are very beneficial to pushing this out for us. Plus to encompass the business districts north and south, and just helps us clean up, make things look a little bit better.
Just to update you on the Patterson Lake, it did add nearly 1,700 acres to Park and Rec, our repertoire out there, but people think, oh, we can put up more houses out there, we can do, no, we're strictly limited to recreational opportunities out there. But yes, the current houses out there are in the process of being purchased right now as we speak.
The land, the houses,
The land, correct.
Okay, anybody have anything else on the ETZ boundary? I think we'll have some more discussion on that coming up, I would imagine. I don't know if anybody heard me the last time, but the next item, we'll move on to item 7 is development agreement discussion. Mr. Hadley?
Yeah, I'm going to start off, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The development agreements have been handled throughout history in Dickinson when we've started utilizing these by the city attorney, by the planning department, by the engineering department, and we also had different times that we took it to the city commission for acceptance. Sometimes it was before at the time the plat was being brought and offered to the city commission for final approval, and other times it was after. And the rationale was sometimes the conditions might change at the city commission level, and the development agreement could be changed then and brought forward. On straightforward ones, it seems as though we're almost looking at if we have a development agreement that's workable, that we would bring that, obviously we have them in our packets of planning commission, then it would go to the city commission with the final plat. Now, that saves them a couple weeks, obviously, at least, in processing and getting it forward if it's clear and if legal and engineering are on board at that time. So just kind of wanted to get your feedback on how you see that working, or if there's a problem, or if we need to amend it, and also from legal and engineering if they have any other ideas of how they want to do it, and who's going to take charge of kind of being, I think legal is in charge of that, but does legal always want to present development agreements? I don't know, as we've had the discussion on stable estates for last night, legal, they're very good at making sure that we have a legal agreement. Ms. Winko probably doesn't keep up on all of the conditions of approval for everything that goes through. So between Loretta and I, it probably falls on us depending on what the major issues are. It really doesn't matter to me who and what and where we do it. We just need to be on the same page and then make sure that the applicants know who to work through the most. So if they're working through me, or if they're working through legal, or if they're working through engineering. So any preferences, whatever, that's why we brought this up. It came up at last night's city commission meeting. That's why we're talking about it today.
going through my archives quickly last night, they did used to come to planning, always.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I think I'm not even going to attempt that, I don't think. From my perspective, as far as the legal end of it, whether it comes through planning and zoning so that you're aware of it, obviously it's a contract, so it needs to be signed off by the city commission and finally approved. I would prefer that it be presented either, whether that's planning and zoning or at the city commission level, by either engineering or planning, simply because the two of them know the intricacies of what needs to be in the agreement. I will certainly review it for the legal end of it, but those two sitting over there are going to be the ones that can answer the specific questions with regard to the specific requirements. Not to put it back on them, but I just think that they're more qualified to bring that forward. And of course, if there's any legal questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them. I always look at the development agreements before they even get to your level. So they usually have me review way ahead of time. So by the time it gets here, I will have already given my input. But I think it's better suited for the city from an informational purpose if it comes from either of those departments.
Thank you, Ms. Michael. I wasn't trying to put you on the spot, but when I first came here, all of the development agreements, which we didn't know where they were locked in the city attorney's office. So, so anyway, that I don't know that we disagree. Loretta, you have any? We can arm wrestle and see who's going to do it, I guess.
No, it would just be nice if you had other direction or some input. We really want to know what your feelings are on it. As Attorney Winkle said, you know, these all go to her for review during the process. Sometimes, unfortunately, she gets them more than once as changes are made, but we sure can work together and bring those forward. But if your preference is to have them brought before this board in addition to commission, you know, we would like to hear that, and we can make sure that that happens moving forward. If it's something that you want to see drafts of so that you know about it, but it goes straight to commission, we can do that also. But we would really like your input today.
I just, I mean, we haven't had many for a long time, so, I mean, the stuff I found, I think they used to come at final plat. There was a draft development agreement at final plat.
There's actually one when everybody applies, there's actually one that's in the packet, even in the preliminary stage now. But it changes, and it can change so much, and it's their first cut. It's the applicant's first cut of what they're proposing to do. So, you know, the first cut of it at a preliminary plat for a development agreement probably isn't going to be anything that resembles what comes to the city commission for a final plat. So it's a work in progress. I use it as a template. I mean, we still have plat conditions that we put on all the plats and whatnot that go through. Those are incorporated into the development agreement, but then there's also sureties and construction for public infrastructure that really is the reason we're doing the development agreement. So it's more the public surety that public infrastructure that's planned and proposed by a development is actually put in. And the reason we hit that so hard is because we've had a number of developments in the past that didn't do that. So that's the number one goal of the development agreement. Sorry, I'm fading away.
So I think what everybody's saying is it's consistent with what the city code provides, which if you look at it's 34.040, it's the development agreements essentially says that planning and zoning, you should see that packet, you should see a draft development agreement in your application for a subdivision, and then when you make that final decision to have that new zoning go forward to the city commission, then we would finalize the development agreement. So I think that's what you've seen in the past, but there's no reason you couldn't look at the full agreement. It just says that it's part of the planning and zoning packet.
Just to add to that, I think some of what has happened in the most recent ones, as we're just trying to keep things moving forward. And so it hasn't probably come to this board.
Where ultimately, you know, the approval of that is going to lie with the city commission. So even if the event that it is brought before you, it is going to be essentially brought, it would be to be hopefully in final form, but also can be amended pursuant to any discussions that happen at city commission level. But I think the consensus is it can be done if that's what you are requesting, with the understanding that it's subject to modification at the city commission level.
No, yeah, I think we all understand that. I mean, anything, we're just advisory here, so. Okay, anything else on DAs? Well, I will move us to the end of our list, unless anybody has any other concerns or questions. I'd look for a motion to adjourn.
Did we answer their question?
Well, I think,
From here and then going, like, over
did we answer it or not? Well, I thought what Mr. Winningham said is that it should be in our packet, I mean, by code, so.
It's an evolution, you'll get it in the
Yeah.
preliminary version, you'll get it in the final version. We just haven't emphasized it, but really the conditions of approval are one and the same, and the conditions of approval will deal with if they shall bond, they shall build a public road, they'll put sewer and water in, they'll do all that. So in essence, you're really doing that anyway, but we'll just do that. And I guess my biggest answer is going to be that on a straightforward project, we will bring the development agreements with the final plat to the city commission. It doesn't affect this board, but it does affect the process if it's ready.
Yeah.
If these two are okay with the development agreement at the time the final plat can go to the city commission, then I will take it and it will be approved with the final plat. So it'll be cleaner and quicker.
That's fine, that works. All right. Anything else, anyone? Motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I will second.
All right, we got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.